there is a time when you have to gather up all the courage inside of you to overcome some sense of inferiority. And I have had that as a little kid growing up in the village. Uh, Part of it was I was a very shy person, and I don't even know how to talk to girls when I was growing up because I don't know, just it was what it was, and it was comfortable for me to run away and enjoy the beauty and the calmness of the beach and go there and fish or do some other stuff. But it was not normal and not natural for me to to live the bold lifestyle that I eventually ended up with. And when I came to the Hawaiian Islands for my first missionary training, I realized that there were some things I needed to let go, and one of those things I let go was the shyness and the I was afraid of speaking because I didn't want the wrong words to come out of my mouth because my English at that time was not good. It's still getting there today, but it was a very difficult challenge to overcome because for some reason, because I was the youngest of my siblings from my dad's side. So the youngest always have, the oldest two have all the attention and all that. And I grew up in a family where my grandparents raised me. And in my culture where I grew up, you're expected to be seen but not heard. So when I came back into the islands after my missionary endeavors in Hawaii, I came back to the island with this vision in my heart to raise the church awareness to what we can do in the outside world. And at that time it was the culture of the island is that the parents raise their children for the future benefits for the family, not the children sent out and they go and do missionary work, which is free of charge, and you pay to get involved. So when I came back to the islands, one of my challenge was to raise the awareness that our people, the Samoan people, were known to be missionaries in past generations. We were known to be the people that the missionaries came from Tahiti through the London Missionary Society. And within one generation, the Samoan people rose up and said, we will take the gospel to places that the gospel has not gone to. So we sent our missionaries from the islands to Papua New Guinea, and they were notorious. And many of them never came back. They died there on the mission field. And I heard stories that broke my heart because in those days it was known that when the news come back, because it was a long way to bring the news of a missionary or a couple who were missionaries in Papua New Guinea were eaten by the New Guineans. And so the news came back. And when it came back to the islands where these seminaries were training people for missions, for the ministry, one missionary passed and 10 Samoans who were in training raised their hand and said, we will take his place. So they began the preparation of going into New Guinea. So we sent missionaries from Samoa to Nauru, to some Solomon Islands, to New Guinea. And in those days, they were vicious, they were savages. And cannibalism was very normal way of life there. So it was quite an amazing history of the church growth. And the missionaries were trained very, very well. And I personally had a chance to travel to New Guinea with a spiritual leader that I respect Derek Prince. We met in New Guinea and we spent time ministering amongst the churches in Papua that were pastored by Samoan pastors from the generation past. At the same time, I have in my village where I grew up, one of my extended families back there, their children were sent as missionaries, so they went to nursing and doctor and medical school, and they ended up becoming missionaries for medical purposes in New Guinea. So I was familiar and connected to that history. So it was a known idea that we wanted to resurrect that spirit of mission sending and impacting and extending the Samoan gift of being not afraid of going out into other places to take the gospel of Christ. So, but the way to go through that was through pastors. And I remember meeting with some of the pastors in the LMS or Congregational Church in the islands. At that time, we had maybe 1 or 2 missionaries who were sent through our training programs in Hawaii to India and to Japan. And so we were telling their story. We went to the pastors and we said, do you know we have a Samoan missionary today in Japan and in India? And so that was the founding stories that we started with. And we just felt like if we can tell the stories to other pastors and Christian leaders in the island, we might get a window into their congregation and into their young people to challenge them to consider the cause of Christ into the mission field. And at this time, we all were exposed to the possibilities that we not only can send Samoan missionaries into Asia, we can send them to Africa, we can send them to South America, and which was an interesting dynamic. And I remember one of the pastors in the village where my wife and I were staying, we attend the church, which is a congregational church service, and we ended up spending time with this particular couple. And they happen to know the Lord, they have an experience with Christ. And so we were talking to them about what is going on in missions. And we began to see the crack of interest. So as we told the stories of missionaries that were serving the Lord in Japan and India, and at that time, just a very limited amount of Samoan missionaries, the church opened their doors and we were able to raise up a younger generation, and they went to Hawaii. Some of them did their training in the islands and then volunteer. I remember having a training program in, we call it the Discipleship Training School. And these 2 young men came from Western Samoa, and they came and their vision was to go to Brazil. They came with the idea that they wanted to go and be missionaries in South America. So we had them go through the training. They were able to raise their fares and got the visas. And then we prayed for them and sent them to Brazil. They later on, after a couple of years, they later on rose in the ranks of the mission agency to become the leaders of some of the major operation in Brazil. One in a little place called Manaus and one in Rio de Janeiro. They were amazing leaders and effective ministry. But what happened after that was the beginning of a younger generation of young people beginning to rise up from Samoa. And instead of us just talking to the leaders, now we're talking to a younger generation of 18, 19-year-olds. And then, of course, we have a ministry that we had. And then I remember one event took place. It was, I believe, it was the 125-year celebration of the arrival of the missionaries in the islands, and I felt strongly that I needed to go and and attend the meeting. I went there, and I was the youngest person in that circle of pastors. These are pastors from all the denominations of the London Missionary Society in both American and Western Samoa. And they were meeting at the place where John Williams arrived with the message of the gospel on the boat that was specifically designated and named the something of peace. And when he arrived many years earlier, Samoa was not a good place at that time. There was a lot of bloodshed. There was war going on between the chiefs and a rivalry between the chief on the main island and the island of Savaii, where this event took place. And of course, Chief King Malitoa was in Upolu waging this war against the chief and the leaders of the other party in Samoa. and the message came from the island of Savaii saying to him, there are white people coming to Savaii and they want to see you, because their strategy was to go after the king. And King Malito came back, and the tremendous history of the church happened. My wife and I were thinking of producing a movie on the story of how the gospel came to Savaii, and that transaction of having the Samoan people who were still in steep in their own religion and the worship of the ancestors changed their history and changed the church. They gave in to the missionary. The missionary at that time was John Williams, and he had some Samoans who were living in Tahiti when he arrived in Tahiti, and he trained them, brought those Samoans with him to the islands of Samoa, and that's how the gospel came to our island. Amazing history. And of course, King Malito went on a trip to Manua and met with King Tui Manua of the kingdom where I'm from, the island group where I'm from, and they both made a decree that Samoa will be under the rule of the kingdom of God. That was the history, and then from that history came the fervor of having to train people for ministries. Many young Samoans volunteered to be trained. Some of the training centers that were started then are still known today. I lived in one of those properties when I was living in Samoa after I came back from Hawaii. And while we were doing this spreading of the news to the pastors that Samoans can also be effective missionaries into the frontier of missions in the world. I was sitting in that meeting with these pastors, and they were talking to each other, and I understood what they were talking about. They were reminiscing on what happened when the gospel first came. There was a talk about the prophecy that was in the back of King Malito's mind when he came from Upolu to Savaii to receive the missionaries. A prophecy given to his ancestors by a prophetess of the Samoan culture, saying that your kingdom is going to come from heaven. And so it also happens that the white people are called Palangi. Pa means burst, Langi is heaven. So, it's very logical that the people we were hosting, bringing the gospel and the good news with them, are somewhat related to that prophecy. And so that's how the gospel took hold It was one of the most radical transformation of any people group in the world on how fast Christianity took over. And part of that was the strategy to reach the kings first, the hierarchy of the culture, and then they passed down to the rest of the people, and so Samoa became a Christian nation. And but I remember that evening I was listening to the story throughout the morning, and I thought, I need to do something myself, because when I'm engaging in some event and an idea is raised or a thought came to me, I need to tomorrow I'm going to swim out into the Bay Area where the missionaries came into the island of Savai'i, a place called Sapapali'i. And so the next morning I got up, put on some swimming shorts, and I swam out into the ocean, and I made a prayer. I prayed a very simple prayer. I said, God, just like in the old days when our people received your good news to us, it saved our people from bloodshed. I want to take the flame of what happened in the past to the present generation. And we were praying and believing God for this. And it was a very tough battle, because the Samoan church has a very high regard for the younger people and the younger generation. So they were careful not to send out the best of the best. But what happened is we were able to be accepted by some of the leaders, and we were able to speak and just kind of introduce the idea of, is it possible that our turn as a new generation of Samoans who have never had, because what we have in the islands as a remnant of that first movement were pastors who were born on the mission field, who came back for training, but instead of going back to where their parents were serving, they came back and became church pastors of the local churches throughout the islands. Eventually, they become real significant leaders for the church, and they were born on the mission field. As a matter of fact, one of the gentlemen who was born on the mission field came back, and he became the Prime Minister of Western Samoa. So we had a lot of these examples and role models that we say to them, remember, Samoa is now benefiting from our sowing into other countries and placing our youth into the hands of God and trusting Him that He will bring back the return of their saving, of their faith and their service to the kingdom. Amazing stuff. And then of course we saw the tide broke with young people today. You can find Samoans in Thailand, you can find Samoans in Laos, you can find Samoans in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in all throughout Asia. And then also it went into further up into North America with teams of young Samoans who were leading their works up amongst the Native Americans. Some of them went and got married, and today have families with children who are mixed Samoan Islands and Native Americans. Also, it went down with our young people that we saw and participated in the flow of that eventually became a flood of young people just going all over the place. And our prayers is that it will continue to do, because what it does is it broke the mold of the missionaries are not from the West. Christian missionaries are not from the West. They also are from people of Native American background, Pacific Island background, and they can take the gospel and become more effective in leading other countries. We have the leader for the work in Bangladesh today, who is a Samoan married to a Bangladeshi girl, and so it's an incredible opportunity that we saw in the olden days. We have young people who were recruited from villages and from taro plantations in the far outside of Hawaii and American Samoa and Western Samoa, who heard the call, and then they raised their hands and said, "I want to go as a missionary." So, and I remember my wife and I were up in Canada. We were helping out in a training program that was run by one of these young Samoan leaders who were up there and married into a Canadian young lady, and their family was growing, and they brought in Samoan Islanders from Samoa to do a training in Alberta. And so when we went up there, it was fantastic to see these young people in a circle having a chance to just find out where you're from, where you're from, where you're from. And I will mention it on a different video, the impact of that time and how in history it was the birthing of that, a small island group in Samoa, both Western and American Samoa, contributed so much into the mission field. We sent teams down in New Zealand, and we saw Polynesians responding to the gospel. And today there are leaders from New Zealand who took significant roles in the mission agency that we work with. So it's possible that things like that can happen again in this new generation. And I'm excited to sit here talking and remember the faces and remember conversations that started and initiated out of, sometimes it was more of a trying to overcome the anti-feeling of, why are you here taking our young people overseas when we need them here in the islands? And today, many of them are seeing these young people as proud heroes of the Samoan Islands that are representing us in leading the work of Christ in other nations. They went all the way to Africa and in Europe, and there's not a place that we have not seen young Samoans rise up, and they took the flag of Christ and his saving message into all of the world, because that was our mandate, was to know God and to make him known in all the nations of the earth. And they became very effective leaders. Even to this day, many of them are leading key works in many different places around the world. And so I just want to mention that, because that's part of what I am reminiscing and thinking about, how grateful I am that there was a point in my own life when, in my own insecurity and in my own small ways, to have contributed to the planting of the seed that eventually became a part of a movement of young people that are now crossing the world. And of course, we have our own ministry that had to do with cultural redemption that are now positioned around the world, and in the US and Hawaii, Tonga, and Fiji, and in Australia, they are starting rugby, soccer, rugby training for young people from Fiji, and they're going back to the islands and do clinic and training back there in the islands to raise up more young people to come out. And they are now working. Some of them have played in Japan on a professional level, and with their testimony and sharing the faith that they have and their reasons for why they started in the first place. It just takes a little step to go into this. And I'm so thankful and so grateful for the opportunity that I was given to participate in a very, very small way, because I'm reminded of the saying that big doors open and close through small hinges. what you can do that seems so small to other people, but if it's important enough that make you want to do it and step out in with courage and a sense that there is purpose in your steps and the plan, don't disregard it. It's important. By the way, this is Sosene Le'au. Please follow me. I have a ton of stories along these lines of breaking through the barrier of cultural insignificant from the island. Small little place, but people who came out there have big faith, great hearts of courage, experience God, and decided to have faith and follow God anywhere they believe they can go. And today the world is a better place because they have contributed to their part has been contributing to their people. Up in Canada with the Northern American, Native American tribes and Native American communities, the Samoan young people who serve there are contributing and putting their hand on making a difference. And so what started so small does not have to stay small. It can grow and grow and grow. By the way, if you found any value in this and would like to follow me, there's a subscription button on the bottom of this video. Click there so you can stay informed and stay in touch with us as we bring new stories and bring new things that will help you in your journey. Thank you so much for visiting me, and thank you for coming back. Bye-bye for now.